Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back with another video from Annie News, continuing with the cut content videos for Overlord Season 4. We're going to check out what was missed, or changed, from Episode 6.
Unlike how Ainz did back in Episode 4, his leverage of the Quagoa to make the Dwarves meet his demands was completely intentional and just what he wanted.
Yes, he was actually doing something he meant to do. Are you guys enjoying this current season? I am.
Show us, though, was the lengthy history behind this conflict, which Ainz and his army proceeded to make insignificant. It's the classic Overlord trope where these massive affairs are made entirely trivial when Ainz shows up.
Yeah.
So, just like how we always do, let's take a look at what the anime missed from the novels.
Awesome.
Episode 45, The Impending Crisis.
The Impending
Chapters 3 and
Crisis.
4 from Volume 11 of the light novel.
Cool, that looks sick, that dragon looks sick.
Done with the Quagoa from last episode, well, considering that they hadn't yet declared themselves as enemies, Ainz decided it was best to imprison them instead of kill them. Naturally, some experiments were done at first, but until the Quagoa made it clear that they wouldn't cooperate, the old guarders of Nazarick would only test them instead of massacre them. Now, it was during Ainz's journey from one dwarf city to the next that an intermission was given focusing on the Elf King. Remember, the Slain Theocracy was currently at war with the Elves.
Oh, okay.
This wasn't something that we got many details on, but we did know that a major factor in it was Zeshi. So, just like how
Can't wait to see what this person does.
On the whole situation, Episode 6 brings us the Elf Kings. We find out how he's just like Zeshi when it comes to power.
Oh.
As a powerful half-godkin himself, the Elf King was obsessed with creating offspring who were just as strong as he was.
Oh, mate.
Much to the point that he would prioritize sending female elves to the front, all in hopes that one would eventually awaken their true power.
Oh.
Of course, nothing like that had ever happened, so this Elf King was starting to consider other options. Perhaps he would invade the theocracy himself and use his power to retrieve the daughter taken from him so many years ago. Then, by using her as his concubine, he would be one step closer to creating an army of powerful children who could conquer the world. This was the future the Elf King was constantly trying to make for himself. Going back to the main story.
Why cut that out? Oh, that's sick. So there's someone really, there's two people really strong out there that we've not been introduced to properly.
Prior to this whole invasion, the most the Quagoa was known for was attacking in smaller units of 100. Trivial forces that were always easily repelled.
Is this where Ainz thought that there was someone potentially strong enough to kill his
all the dwarves usually needed was a bit of
Black Knight looking things, when they really just broke the bridge?
That would usually be enough to hold them off. But with so many
Shaltir absolutely slaughtered them, man.
There simply wasn't enough manpower to do that anymore. The only option left was to close these doors made of mithril and orichalcum.
Mithril.
Something that would only buy time until the stronger Quagoa arrived. So, before that would happen, the Supreme Commander would consider other options. The safest of which was to relocate to another city again. But with the Quagoa in the royal capital and the southern city already abandoned, that left only the western city. The thing about that, though, was that the western city was caught up in a fight between frost dragons.
Oh, that's cool. Can't we see that as well?
So, unless the dwarves wanted to return to a place that was already rubble, their only options were to remain here in the eastern city or go back south and try Theoraido again. Two less than ideal choices which would both end up in them having to seal the tunnels. If they blew up the area and blocked the doors, then at the very least they could buy time to evacuate to somewhere else. Luckily for them, though, Ainz was able to make it just in time due to the magical beasts Aura had brought. You see, while normally this 60-mile mountain journey would have taken forever, Aura's magical beasts traversed it like it was a field. Not once did any of them lose a single bit of stamina.
Oh, right, okay, we're missing quite a lot of details here.
Ainz was able to receive reports on the Quagoa he'd captured, which, as it turns out, there wasn't much to them that made them worth keeping. Aside from their unique interaction with metal, Ainz didn't find them to be of much interest at all.
No.
What he was rather curious about, though, was the prospect of what would happen if he fed them the rarest metals. Like, how strong would they become if he fed them something like this metal? Would they become super powerful beasts he could add to Nazarick's army, or instead cap out at around the same level as all the other clan leaders?
Interesting.
That was the core question.
That's really interesting. Damn.
Of course, that didn't merit taking in all 80,000 of them.
No.
Ainz did feel he could fit some of them within the Sorcerer Kingdom. I mean, a place for everyone was the goal that he was after.
Yeah.
The only problem was that, considering how the Quagoa went fully blind in the sun, he wasn't sure where he would even put them. It was a problem he felt would be best solved by
so that explains why they're underground all the
now,
time.
Once Ainz had arrived at the fortress,
Cool.
a lot of what was skipped was just comedic points highlighting the dwarves and Ainz's reactions to each other. The dwarves had questioned Gondo before believing he was who he said he was, then Ainz had a bit of trouble distinguishing any one dwarf from all the others. The way their faces and expressions looked so uncannily similar was a comical scene that really did make him want to laugh over it.
Right.
In any case, it was during this whole encounter that
Keep it all inside, internal monologue, and all that jazz.
He did find it a bit rude that they weren't providing any sort of hospitality, but their interactions with Gondo while figuring out who he was did give Ainz the opportunity to observe them. He was able to take mental notes on what these dwarven people were like, specifically their apparent passion for alcohol.
Yeah, so let's go, they like to party.
The victorious chuckle which Ainz forgot to suppress had once again raised the caution of the dwarves, this time spurring Ainz to think he'd made a terrible mistake.
Oh no.
If he was to consider this like a cold call business meeting, then laughing in the face of a client was one of the worst things that you could do.
Yeah,
It
definitely,
was a silly
Jesus.
mistake Ainz knew he'd have to watch out for in the future. So, after he'd scolded himself for being so foolish, Ainz then changed his appearance to make himself more kingly. First, he would take out his imitation staff of Ainz Ulgon, then have it replicate the aura that the original staff would make. This didn't have nearly the same power as the original,
Of
but
course.
from a visual standpoint, it would give the exact same effects. And that would turn out to be enough to knock the Supreme Commander right off his feet.
Damn.
Ainz wasn't sure whether he was frightened or doing some sort of reading, but the length of which he stayed on the ground for was just unnatural. Regardless, it was once past the weird circumstances of their meeting that the commander would accept Ainz's help and lead him to the Regency Council. Before we get to that, though, there was a whole section on the Quagoa's history that the anime didn't really tell us.
Here we go.
They explained the 8 clans which existed before, along with the heroes and rivals from which they descended from. It was a time in which all the clans would fight amongst themselves to make their own stronger. But, just like I said before, when you consider the Quagoa and the grand scale of monsters everywhere, it was easier to count their rank from the bottom than it was the top. In reality, they were nothing more than an inferior set of monsters used as food for those stronger than them.
Damn.
So, considering how primitive their civilizations were, many of the clans who would fight amongst themselves would only do so in order to secure ores to make their own clans stronger.
Right.
It was a core facet of their development.
Because they eat the stuff and it makes them stronger, so it's like, you've got that stuff, we'll fight you for it, and then, oh wow.
It was only natural the Quagoa come to despise them for it. I mean, if there wasn't even enough for their own clans to prosper, then the dwarves depleting it even more was completely intolerable.
This makes total sense.
Where everything began to change for them, though, was when a new king emerged who was the strongest out of all of them. You see, not only did his power surpass that of the ancient hero Pooh, but his overwhelming strength was used to unify the clans. He didn't do so by executing all the other leaders, but instead by leaving them in charge and providing equality to everyone. It didn't matter how strong or what social standing you had, so long as the work you did was valuable, pay Ryura would reward you accordingly. Now, the reason why this is because the sense of reward for a job well done would ensure the other tribes would still be competing with each other, all while preventing the violent hostility of the previous era. It would also ensure his position as ruler, since any enmity towards himself would instead be directed at each other. Then, by using the
Clever little monster.
infrastructure, this new leader was able to advance their civilization in a way that no one had ever done before. He was a benevolent ruler that sought to expand his influence even further now, resulting in this massive operation to take on the dwarves here. So, with an army of his 16,000 strongest, Ryura would lead his people on a mission to wipe out the dwarves once and for all. An immense undertaking which would involve multiple teams, each with a specific task that would lead them to victory. That being the case, the team we saw in the anime was the Elite Vanguard.
The Elite Vanguard, like the pinnacle, right?
Perhaps even the city if they could make it far enough. Of course, just like we saw in the anime, the years of work the
Death
Quagoa
Knights,
had
that's what
spent
they're called.
prepping and training for this mission meant practically nothing once Ainz was involved. Once again, Ainz had made the hopes and dreams of an entire race amount to nothing. Well, that hasn't happened just yet, but if you've watched episode 7, then I'm sure you already know it has. Before I get too ahead of myself, though, there was quite a bit to be said about Ainz's time in the city first. Like, while waiting for his...
Episode 8 was pretty good as well.
Gondo and Ainz had become well acquainted with each other. Both were acting rather buddy-buddy, but one was much less into it than the other. As it turns out, the only reason why Ainz listened to Gondo's endless talks at all wasn't because he wanted to make him feel better, but instead because of the useful information that could be gained from it. Sure, Ainz did feel Gondo was kind of a kindred spirit, but he definitely didn't see him as more than just a useful support figure. Now, a key thing to note about Ainz's visit is that the whole thing was intended to be a public spectacle. You see, as an undead walking throughout the city, Ainz wanted his presence to be known.
Of course.
He wanted everyone to know that he had come here. Reason being that, in the off chance that there were players amongst the dwarves, then approaching the city diplomatically as he did would prevent them from wanting to attack him with weapons he wasn't familiar with. Considering the dwarves were having such trouble with the Quagoa though, the odds of there being players here were very low. That or they could just be extremely low level. What made Ainz rethink that hypothesis quickly after though was the sudden disappearance of his Death Knights. The fact that those two summons were defeated immediately opened up a whole new world of possibilities.
Yeah, you would kind of think, wait a minute, what's going on?
Player, but at the very least he was dealing with someone over the level of 40. Perhaps a strong New Worlder that possessed incredible ability. It was once Ainz had come to that conclusion that he quickly began to rethink his plans for the Quagoa. You see, ideally Ainz would have liked to continue to use them. If this war continued to drag on longer, then the dwarves would have no choice but to rely more and more on Ainz, eventually leading them to the only place they could go for safety, under control of the Sorcerer Kingdom. So, what Ainz would have liked to do was control the Quagoa from the shadows, then use their imminent threat to force the dwarves into a corner that they couldn't escape from. It was as soon as those Death Knights were defeated, though, that Ainz knew this plan wasn't something that he could follow through with.
Yeah, gotta kind of reassess there, just in case.
Monsters at a level above the Death Knights, then that was a risk Ainz wasn't willing to take. There was no telling how strong they'd become in the future, and that was the leading factor behind Ainz wanting to subjugate them sooner rather than later. Moving on to his meeting with the council, and the key takeaway from this was the Dwarf Kingdom's perfect fit as a trading partner. You see, as of now, the Sorcerer Kingdom didn't have anything special they could sell to other countries.
Yeah.
Whether it was food or supplies, most, if not all, could be found everywhere else.
Gotta
When
get.
it came to dealing with the dwarves, though, because their society was limited to what was found and grown in these caves, any food
It'd be amazing to be able to take that out, trade that around.
The reason they hadn't leveraged these trades with anyone else before was mainly due to the lack of usable trade routes. It was simply too risky to send dwarves over the mountains for such marginal returns. That being the case, in an attempt to make the deal even better, Ainz offered to establish roads and proper trade routes. He would even provide his undead as a locomotive force that could double as protection.
God damn. Imagine that.
Good for the council not to be skeptical of. But when Ainz went on to describe his undead as more of a commodity, that's when the council started to become really interested. Not only could they use the undead to increase their mining yields, but the Supreme Commander had even gone to suggest hiring them for defense. Of course, the rest of the council had trouble placing their safety in the hands of another country, but the Supreme Commander and his diminished army of only 100 was well aware that the help was necessary. After having relied solely on the chasm and the two doors to defend their country, there was this false feeling of protection that the dwarves had come to live with. Only the Supreme Commander seemed to understand that once those failed, their people were doomed.
Yeah, there's nothing else after
Now,
that.
given how the conversation was going, there wasn't really much for Ainz to worry about, but he did need to consider what would happen if he began importing mass amounts of dwarven gear. Naturally, the competition would spur his own blacksmiths to try and improve, but too much supply of superior gear would reduce the space in the market for his own blacksmiths, resulting in their numbers to decrease and an overall hit to the Sorcerer Kingdom's capabilities. So, if Ainz was going to import this gear, then he knew a proper balance needed to be maintained regarding local goods and imported goods. It was an issue definitely best handled by Demiurge or Albedo, but Ainz did have a few good ideas himself. Perhaps he could impose some tariffs on the dwarven goods, or even sell the superior gear.
Exclusivity, that's the word we want.
Limit the amount of reach these imports would have on the market, as well as increase his adventurers' survival rates. They were definitely pretty good ideas with regards to handling this. Now, when Ainz was sent away after for the council to discuss, things had actually gotten quite a bit more heated than what we saw in the anime. First, many still weren't sure whether the runecrafters would be used as slaves, then the Chief of Smiths became offended by the Supreme Commander constantly referring to Ainz as His Majesty. By acknowledging a foreign ruler, the Chief of Smiths was making it seem like the Supreme Commander had committed treason.
Damn.
What this chief was failing to grasp, though, was the futile state their country would be in without Ainz's help. And that was
Yeah, mate, like, it's either that or nothing. We'd be left with nothing.
So, when all was said and done, the dwarves accepted Ainz's terms just like how he saw them. It was so easy, in fact, that Ainz actually felt bad for having to exterminate the root cause of it. I mean, if not for the Quagoa taking the fort, then who knows how much time and money would have been needed to acquire the runecrafters. Aside from that, there was also one other thing Ainz requested, and that was a custom suit of armor for Zardius. The The stated purpose was to celebrate the birth of his child, but really, Ainz just wanted to keep the father of his rare lizard men safe.
Cool.
That way he could bring about even more of them in the future.
Hell yeah.
Ainz was hoping
Lizard
to use
army.
the rare ore he'd been hearing about to craft it, but when he found out the rarest metal the dwarves possessed was adamantite, he instead presented a level 45 metal from Yggdrasil. It was a gift that went to make the chief of smithing slightly more fond of him. Ainz had even spotted the dwarf blushing because of it.
Ah, nice.
Fast forward now to the meeting with the rune crafters next, and while most of it was pretty much the same, Ainz had actually ended up lending them the sword to study after.
Oh, he left it with them. Okay, cool.
Could possibly imbue was for. Each were intrigued by the challenge bestowed upon them. They were all ready to devote their lives as apprentices to the Sorcerer Kingdom. If this would end up being the product of their work, then no matter how impossible the challenge seemed, all were happy to spend their lives attempting it. Now, the last thing worth mentioning from after this meeting was a thorough look into the mindset which allows Ainz to take advantage of others so easily. It was after he saw just how innocent Shoutir looked to him that he remembered how, in comparison to the rage he felt from having to kill one of his dear NPCs, the thought of making others unhappy to prevent that wasn't even worth considering. Reason being that, to Ainz, the most important people in this world were those from Nazareth.
Mm-hmm.
If you weren't a player or NPC from his guild, then your life was automatically worth 2 to 3 times less to him.
Fair.
It was a train of thought that all stemmed from the conclusion that all lives weren't equally important. Unless you were absolutely insane, it was practically impossible to be able to think that way. So that's why Ainz is able to do what he does so easily. He would easily kill any number of humans just to protect the greater good of Nazareth.
Damn, alright.
But yeah, that's
Losing his humanity.
If you enjoyed what you saw, then feel free to leave a like and let me know in the comments. But anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time, ciao.
Some interesting stuff left out, like always. It's always nice to see what the changes were. Yeah, I'm really enjoying the current season, and I'm really enjoying these cut content videos. They're absolutely boss. And yeah, check out the next one when it comes out. Anyway, thank you to my patrons. If you want to be named at the end of every video I upload, link in the description of the Patreon page. $1 a month is all I ask to help support the channel. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you guys very much for that, and thank you all for watching. What do you guys think of that? If you guys think of this, click like, subscribe if you haven't already, leave comments down below. Let me know what I should watch and discuss in future videos. And I'll see you guys, next time.